there was a guy that quit the team actually because he wanted to use Tableau, and I went with another tool, and I feel bad because he was really smart, and I think I just I didn't explain my decision well enough. It was a pretty big loss actually, so it was really important to actually communicate why I was choosing this over another one.
What is up, digital insiders? Welcome to the last episode of this data mini series with Shane Leese. I'm Mint, your host from Adaptivity. To wrap up our conversations, today we will be discussing, or more like Shane will be sharing the whys, the whats, and the how. Why are we doing stuff with data? What problem it solves, and how we are actually going to be doing it at a high level. So let's jump right into it. Hey Shane, how are you doing?
Not too bad, man.
All right. So yeah, I mean, there's some implications if you are the data guy and if you're saying not too bad, maybe like, do you want to give them percentage? Is it like 60% good, 70% good? How are things?
Yeah, what is too bad? I definitely juggling quite a few things at the moment, and so that could be good or bad depending on the perspective. For my sleep, it's not as good. For my list of accomplishments, it's pretty good, I guess. So yeah, it's all perspective.
All right. So I suppose if you want the work progress, it's gonna be pretty good. If you want the health, maybe yeah, the Dow drops down a little bit, but I'll take it as a good if works are moving forward. So yeah, we are busy people and we are work centric these days. So like, forget about work life balance. But yeah, let's get into the whys of data. So there are lots of things that data could do, and of course, it should be able to solve lots of problems as well as data is the centerpiece of any feedback loops. Well, today we won't be able to talk about all of the problems in the world, but today Shane will be sharing and discussing some interesting cases, which definitely will pique your interest. So, Shane, would you mind sharing some problems companies are facing, like just some examples, and what data could essentially solve?
Sure. I think one of the most common and essential problems to solve at a company is to know the health of your business.
Mm,
How many customers do you have? How often are they coming back and purchasing again? Which products that you sell the most or the least? Maybe you don't make as many of those, or maybe you have a pretty big business and there's data being generated by different departments, and it's kind of trapped in those departments. We have these things called data silos, which we want to break down. So one of the big problems we like to solve, and the tools for solving it are like data warehousing and like BI, business intelligence. This for breaking down those barriers between teams and those creating those knowledge streams that people can all drink from.
okay. Okay, so well, definitely like it helps the business assess their own health and see maybe that there's something that they could work with or there's something that they could do to make the health of their business better
Sure.
and solve the problem with data silo, which essentially means that information are not or data are not shared between the silos or different departments, different entity business unit, which creating a data warehouse would make the experience more seamless in terms of information or data sharing.
Indeed, and in that process, you find new value in the data that you have. There's often overlooked value in data that's whether it's your data or external data, and this is something that came to surprise me the more I dove into the data that's available. So
All right. So yeah, as the saying, data is a new oil, or maybe gold in this case. You will find some gold in your data warehouse, data lake, data stream, data silo. But yeah, you will essentially find some value in understanding your data.
mhm.
All right, let's jump right into our cases. So today, Shane, you have two cases to share with us and the audience. So the first one, you call it setting up e-commerce BI platform. Well, first of all, give us a big picture of what this is about when it happened.
Sure. Yeah. So this was probably the first project I worked on here in Bangkok when I joined Pomelo. And
Mm.
for those that don't know, it's a e-commerce platform selling mostly fashion and I think even some like homeware stuff now too.
So, well, basically, Pomelo is the one of the biggest or like and the fastest growing startup on fashion e-commerce.
Yeah, yeah, they've transformed a few times, and now you can find hundreds of popular brands on there, and I think data was key and key in the growth of that company. So
Mm. All right. So, yeah, tell us a little more about the BI platform, or maybe first of all, like what does e-commerce BI platform mean for the audience?
sure. So at Pomelo, we had a number of different teams generating data that needed to make decisions on this data, and often that a lot of demand for data resources, and that means either you had analysts in the team or you had a guy or two that was really smart running around maintaining Excel models for the different teams and updating them so they can predict how much to buy or figure out how much we're spending on different marketing channels per customer for calculating your acquisition cost so that this could feed into the financial models to predict the overall growth of the company and profitability. So each team had either an input or an output on that model that needed to feed into a company wide model, and it certainly wasn't efficient at the time. And so yeah, I came in to solve this problem.
Okay, so exactly what you mentioned earlier, which is there are data silos in Pomelo,
Mhm.
and you came in to essentially make the process more efficient
Yes.
in terms of sharing our data to ultimately create the company wide financial model.
Well, yeah, the financial model or just the health model. Yeah, right.
Got it. Business health model.
Yeah, anybody could see what's going on in marketing and draw the relationships between marketing spend and items sold. And yeah,
So, Shane, tell me how the process works. How did you start? And yeah, walk us through the journey.
okay, yeah. So basically, I came in, and the teams that are generating the most data were probably the ones most crippled by these problems with creating the most demand for this problem to be solved.
Mm.
In our case, it was the marketing teams. So when I joined, they were very happy to find that there was a new person coming in that could help them to crunch this data. More than happy to know that now they're going to have more time for other initiatives. Unfortunately, I couldn't alleviate their problems as quickly as they desired, because in order to change a big problem like this, it's less of a capacity thing and more of a mindset shift. So I had to really avoid falling into the trap of just adding more fuel to the same old engine, right? So yeah, a short-term fix would have been to just help them out crunching these data in Excel and allow them to generate more data. But instead I had to actually create some space for myself to solve the problem for the whole company. So basically, I needed to look for a quick and easy solution to take the data that marketing was generating from, say, Facebook or Google Ads or platforms like Apps Flyer that we use for attribution and acquisition, and a number of other platforms that they were using, and exporting data, combining it. And I'm like, okay, this works. This is a one-off thing, and we want to automate this. So I took a look at the tech stack that we had, and everything was running on AWS, and very helpful engineering department that loved to help me use the existing infrastructure that they built with a lot of hard work. And again, I wanted to remain nimble, so I'm like, okay, I know what we have, but I need to create something that's a safe place for me to work with this data. Initially, I actually even took the website down, trying to export data from our production database to crunch it on my local computer. And I'm like, okay, let's
Oh yeah, you mentioned that I think like in maybe episode 1.1 or point 2.
Oh, I might have. Yeah, yeah. Oops. This was like early days, and like, yeah, we can't do that. So I wanted to create a safe space, and so AWS had, it was fairly new at the time, but they had this tool called Redshift. It's a data warehouse, pretty easy to spin up, not too expensive, $180 a month, which is, it's a lot for maybe an individual, but not much for a company, right? So yeah, AWS Redshift. This was, I was learning as I went, so it seemed easy enough. I was able to click a few buttons and have the resources available, and with a free trial for a month or two, even I could, didn't even have to get too much clearance from the higher ups on this. So it was key actually to not raise too many eyebrows. Not getting the head of engineering concerned about costs, and not making big shifts that would require a lot of higher up decision making. So yeah, when you're booting up a new team, it's always a very in demand problem. People want to offer their old processes and infrastructure to help solve your problem. And yeah, I want to make sure I could solve the problem holistically. So not for just the loudest people in the room. So yeah, while we set up this infrastructure, we also needed to set up like a ticketing system at the same time to make sure that people's concerns could be heard. Coming in, there's expectations. You're a data leader. You can't just be quietly building stuff. People want to know that you're listening, and we also want to know what the company's problems were. So we were one of the first to do this in a public way. We're like, just what do you need? What's going on? Submit a ticket. We couldn't promise to solve everything, but we got a very quickly grew a big backlog of data problems that the company needed solved. But this gave me the fuel I needed to ask for more help, more analysts, more data engineers. Yeah.
Got it. So it's not just the platform that you are solving, right? But it's both the mindset and the infrastructure of how the team works as well.
Oh yeah, it's a culture thing. It's a mindset. Yeah, so you got to get buy-in to make these kind of shifts. It's, no matter how wonderful your system is, if people don't trust it, if they don't trust you, they won't support it, and they won't change the way they're doing things already. So yeah, to start breaking down these silos, we needed to find a lean way to get data into this data warehouse, and was not exactly an ETL data engineer master at myself at the time, and I know a little bit more now than I did then, but still looking for low code options. So I found this thing called Stitch, which is they're still running today, and basically it plugs into your different data sources and destination, and you can run it daily or hourly to pull data and updates from your database, or Facebook ads, and put it all into this data warehouse. So now we're getting all this raw data there. Looks good. We can write SQL on it. We can make our own tables. Don't have to worry about crashing the site when we want to drop a table. Like, great, super cool. But yeah, there was a BI system in place already. It didn't have all the data that people needed. And by the time that it did get the data, it was either out of date. So it needed to be either transformed manually, uploaded there to be visualized. And just the latency was a bit too low for people to make the important decisions that they needed to make. So a lot of times the decisions were being made before they got the data. So we thought we could speed it up a little bit. Okay, we're not ready to move everyone off of this tool that they're using. But at least we'll get some better data in there. And as we got better data in there, we started to run into the limits on that platform. So now we had to go even further. Now we got the data warehouse. We started. We were modeling the data. We built star schemas to handle our orders and our products and our customer data, and joining all the really useful dimensions about these different like fact tables, as we would call, and loading this into a BI platform. And we realized we needed something more powerful. So we started looking at something called Looker, which is a BI tool that at the time was not was pretty niche player, and they were willing to give us some really nice discounts, actually, compared to Tableau, which was like kind of the other big player. So I was on a yeah. I mean, I had used it. I didn't really love it. There was definitely there was there was a guy that quit the team actually because he wanted to use Tableau, and I went with another tool. And I feel bad because he was really smart, and I think I just I didn't explain my decision well enough. It was a pretty big loss, actually. So it was really important to actually communicate why I was choosing this over another one. So I found it to be actually a lot easier for me to use, and I think we had just really good timing. They must have been in their pre-talks with Google to get bought, so they were willing to just get more subscribers on board, give us discounts. It was
Oh yeah.
we got bought for $2.6 billion like the next year. So like
Wow.
we got in. Yeah, now you try to go and get set up with them. They're much less willing to offer discounts than they were then. So yeah.
But yeah, so Looker is used by Shane Leese and Pomelo at a stage of time. So Looker, if you're looking to sponsor the video, you know where to find me.
But yeah, before we even got into visualizing everything, we needed to set up these transformations. We got the raw data. We can write SQL to turn it into more useful data, but this needed to be done regularly on a scheduled basis. So again, we were trying to bypass most of the kind of engineering capacity. They were always very, very busy with the needs of the product team, building out new features, making sure that the app would run efficiently and the website, and that we could see the status of your order and get your email confirmations. Like there was so much going on, I didn't want to add anything extra to them. So we were doing as a startups do, and we were hacking things together. Had a computer in the office that it was on 24/7, that would trigger a job to transform some data. It was a UPS connected, in case there's some power loss. So come in the morning and don't have to worry about why isn't the data ready. So yeah, everything was kind of hinged on this BI computer for a while until we moved things into the cloud. And we were using a couple of other free tools, Jenkins and Pentaho, which are one's Jenkins for like scheduling jobs, and Pentaho was handling the transformations. And yeah, it was good for a 3-4 person team. In retrospect, I don't think I would do it quite the same way, but there's also some new tools that have come on the scene since then. But yeah, after we started getting all this this data available in Looker, we needed to make a big transition from the existing platform, and need to go through with each of the different teams to see which reports were really useful to them, so we could prioritize what needed to be moved over. And also to make sure that people would be able to use this new tool. So we set up like data classes, data like we would bribe them with pizza, but we started off with Excel training, showing people how to do like use pivot tables, VLOOKUPs, index match, and just build the general data literacy of the organization in preparation to roll out self-service BI, which is in theory and hypothetically can be absolutely great. It also can be very messy if a lot of people are making a lot of different reports, and there does need to be like a centralized repository of like, these are the things that we look at for these things. You define these metrics in a certain way. So, we learned as we did it, and as people started to become misaligned of, what gross revenue was or net revenue. These seem like simple things, but there's a lot of different types. Like, does it include the taxes, the cost of the goods sold, and like
Okay, so it's the definition, like defining like the columns problem. Like people don't know what they're talking about.
yeah, I think things need to be well defined in this platform so that they could actually do it self-service. So
Got it. Got it. Sounds like it's something that a data dictionary could help. I mean, like
uh-huh.
I'm sure like it's like a data dictionary is for a different purpose, but yeah, that's the name really suggests that it helps.
No, it certainly was the thing that we needed. In retrospect, it was something that should have been built sooner. It always just kind of fell lower on the priority list getting the next set of data ready or the next report ready for some team.
Documentation, no fun for no one.
No one, no one wanted to do it. It is, but it's hard. And now I realize now that's in the projects that I do now, it's like starts with the data dictionary before I even get to modeling the data. Like this is okay. This is what it needs to be, and we work backwards from here. So yeah, I learned I learned some lessons. But yeah, this was launching this. It took us probably 2 to 3 months just to get like the data warehouse up and running with a lot of the useful data in there and modeled. There was two people. It was one person that was me and another guy that was pretty busy with a lot of his existing work, and we slowly got up to like I think we got my first hire after 3 4 months. By a year, I think the team was about four or five people, give or take an intern, right? And so yeah, we managed to get our BI platform up and running, and it was never it's never really done. That's one of those things. It's like, when is it done? Like it was ready after a year and a half, but I think it was constantly growing and changing as the business changed. Well, basically, it took 2 or 3 months just to get the data centralized and for people to be able to trust that the data that was coming out of this data warehouse was the truth and could be used for making decisions.
So 2 3 months for things to get started, and then after a year, you can then start harvesting from the things that you have created.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because we also we didn't want to pull the plug on an existing platform. Although I was new at the company, it was still a company running for, quite a few years, and big risk to try to move everybody over all at once. So it had to be gradual and careful. So yeah.
All right. So let me try to recap on what you just said in terms of the procedure for
Hmm.
creating the BI platform, right? So first of all, you go into the company. Probably the first thing that you would need to figure out is being a part of the team and getting buy-ins and building the trust from all of the team members of the current company, because you are there and then you will be making some changes, because essentially the company will need some cultural change. They need to have some data mindset for this to actually work. And then
Hmm.
what you did next is you try to understand the problem. So you set up the ticketing system, right? And then yeah, you got lots of ticket in the system, which you essentially get to work and start solving them, right? And then meanwhile you are doing that, you start building your data warehouse. You use Redshift for data warehousing. You then use Stitch, which is a low code for ETL, right? And then more tools for scheduling, for data transformation. And back then you were using Looker for data visualization,
Hmm.
right? So with that, probably, well, tell me if I'm wrong, but that already be a year for you, or is this just like the 2 3 months that you mentioned earlier?
Oh no! By the time we got Looker up, I mean, it took a few months just to get that contract signed, right?
Mm.
You're choosing this and you're thinking like this is going to be in place for for years, right? So we didn't want to rush into anything. Even I actually had evaluated Looker in my first month there, and I was like, I'm not ready for this. It seemed pretty complicated at the time compared to what they had in place, and I was like, okay, I'm not ready to commit to this big change. When I came back to it after a few months, and I realized that we had gone to the ends of what like Magento had a BI platform. I'm not sure if it still exists, maybe, but we had gotten to the end of its its functionality, like really hit the limits. And when I came back to evaluate Looker again, they added so many new features, and they were continually adding. And I was just really impressed by the speed of their development, and it seemed like it was well suited for a fast growing startup like ours. So that whole thing took that was at least my first year before we making some good progress, and definitely making some people nervous with the slow speed of progress too, which is tends to be the case actually with a lot of these things. Like it's not there's no real quick fix to a lot of these data problems.
Yep. So I mean, like, it took us probably 2 minutes to mention all the names and the tools, but yeah, the actual process actually took years, right?
Mm,
So yeah, the transformation was Pantaho, and what's the scheduling one called that you used?
Jenkins,
Jenkins.
like the butler.
Ah, okay, Jenkins. Got it. Right. So, yep, the system is all up, and then I mean, like, it's not towards the end, but I'm sure, like, in the meantime, you are also training your team to be more
Hmm.
data literate so they can use the data better and maybe create a self-service BI so they can
Right.
actually use the data efficiently.
Yeah, not just my team, but the whole company, right? It was the idea around data literacy, and it's becoming a data driven organization. Is it's less about just like having the data, but actually like trusting it, asking better questions, right, and just generally raising the bar on your data discourse. It means better decisions, better questions, not jumping to conclusions. And sometimes there isn't going to be data available, but you run into a problem that's like, oh, we saw this before. Okay, I can look this up. This is how this went last time. And then like, okay, we don't have the data to back it up just yet, but like we need to make a decision. So you also have a knowledge base. You have an easy to access knowledge base of what's happened and when and what happened next. And getting people comfortable with navigating through this knowledge base is the key to a truly data driven organization.
Yep. All right. So the last question from me on this case would be, when do you think like a company or an e-commerce company should have a BI platform? Like at what stage or like how big would the company needs to be for this to actually make sense?
Okay. Well, a lot of companies are not like really ready. This is the truth. I think we found that like it's hard, but like the earlier the better. Uh, but you got to keep it lean, right? Because in early stages, you have limited resources. And you always have limited resources, but you're really trying to find like product market fit, right? So like if you're comfortably growing and you're like you can't get a clear picture of what's going on in the business, then it's clear that you're probably like a little bit late on it at that point. But a lot of companies can get by with Google Sheets and Excel models for quite a long time. Like you'd be quite surprised by the number of businesses that have no type of BI, and you'd think that they would. So, not to say that it's right, but I might be biased to say like the earlier the better, because when it's early, it's quite easy. It's actually quite easy when you do it from the beginning. It's like, oh yeah, just like we'll put the data there. Sometimes the business is changing. The schemas are changing, and the same guys that you could be spending money to have build a data warehouse could be improving your production tech stack for your customers. So it really depends, I guess.
So, I mean, I actually kind of agree, right? So, the earlier the better is probably the good answer because like you mentioned, like no one would ever be ready because it's not something that will directly contribute to your revenue or like the company growth unless you actually use the output of the BI to actually make decisions, right? Which you would actually never know. So, maybe
Right.
decide to implement them earlier than you think. That would be the most accurate
Mhm.
answer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you gotta look at the cost of the tools and the cost of the team and what percentage of your revenue or your overall like OpEx like that is. And like if it's a huge chunk, then maybe you're not ready. If you're gonna do A/B testing on an app and you only have a couple thousand users, like okay, yeah, maybe you increase the conversion rate by 10% and you made an extra $1,000 that month, but you spent $10,000 building it. Like, okay, it's too soon. So,
All right, so that's for case one. Moving on to case two. I feel like I really like the name of this one. The name of the second case is FEC Donors, Election Prediction Model. So, well, first of all, Shane, tell us a little bit. What does that mean? Or like, what did you build? Did you just like predict the next US election or what's going on?
I mean, this was a lot earlier in my career, right? So, at this time, in my role, I was at this company, RedHop, and I was tasked with creating interesting content for our website. And up until then, I was primarily using our internal rental data, apartment prices and neighborhoods, and trying to see what neighborhoods were hot and which ones were out of reach for certain people. And sure, that's kind of interesting, but I stumbled onto the wealth of free and open data that existed, and I think something I mentioned in an earlier podcast, I created like an interactive map where people could see, like how much
Dog
dog poop.
poop.
Oh yeah. No, this was. I mean, this was fun. I mean, it was a fun interactive map. You have you hover over a little like neighborhood and like a little like poop emoji there. Like, yeah, it was. It got some laughs for sure. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty cheeky too, right? So, uh, I knew that budget was always the biggest factor for people, but having seen the success of these fun topics and they created entertainment value and in turn traffic for our websites. And at that time, this was about 2015, early 2016, it was just being bombarded with headlines about Donald Trump. And I'm like, I don't like the guy, but I'm going to hear about him anyway. So, like, how can I ride this wave? Uh, yeah. So basically, the ingredients for this project were the FEC, which is a federal election commission. They have their monthly published data sets with information by state, by zip code, by the party being donated to, the candidate, zip codes, first name, last name, profession, like so much really detailed stuff. I don't know if this is still publicly available. Like, I don't know. I think data protection laws have changed since then, but I don't know. Like, it was all there. Then some publicly available like geospatial data sets of the U.S. So basically renderings of the U.S. in like a JSON format, and for the state, and then zip code level for like metro areas. I was using RStudio and like the R programming language to analyze this data because it was quite big, right? And I wanted to be able to reproduce this. And for those that know, Excel has a maximum of 1 million rows, and these are big data sets. So it's not big data, but it was for me. It was big data. I mean, at the time, yeah.
At that time.
So yeah, I mean, big data. It's not just like static. It's growing. So you have a data set that's just you can hardly manage it. You need usually distributed like a distributed system with a way to back up the data to like say you have a database, right? And when it gets to a point where it's storing big data, it becomes very expensive. So you need to think about other types of storage like data lakes or lake houses, like sort of hybridized data storage structures. So you're dealing with big data when you're like, oh man, this is going to cost us a lot to store this. And you're like, okay, this is probably big data now. Or if you're not dealing with any like cost problems, it's not it's not probably not big data yet.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great tangent. And it's fun as well. So basically, it's not like some average company without any data professional can handle big data at all. So like big data means that you need like the storage is across many cloud computers with some coding involved, and it will cost you a lot more than you think. Like it's not just like buying 10 external hard disks. It's like or you will need to have lots and lots of external hard disks to store
Mm.
like actual big data. So
Yeah, and because it's this is generally like a very big company where they're adding users, or think about the data that Facebook generates from a billion users doing hundreds or thousands, or depending on how much time you spend on Facebook, tens of thousands of interactions per day. Each of these things are this is a data point. It's stored somewhere. It trains their model to show you what to show you next, right? Or shopping on Amazon, right? They want to make sure you see the best product for you, the best price, right? At the right time. So they're using all this data and they're storing it, and they need to be prepared for the exponential growth that comes. So yeah, generally big data is growing exponentially too. I'd say that's the other factor. It's the speed.
mm,
It's not just the size of it, but the speed at which it's growing.
all right. So when people talk about big data, usually it's not about big data, but you know when you actually see what it is, right? So yeah, let's go back to the not so big data with the FEC public JSON files and change R and RStudio back in the day.
So yeah, on any given month, the FEC would publish their updated data sets around the second half of the month, and I go to the website and download this data, load it up into my R environment, and try to draw some conclusions from it. So there's all these headlines about, this candidate's got this many $1 million in donations, and they're leading by this much. And okay, this other one got, this many donations. Was either talking about number of donations or the total amount. But I was like, okay, money doesn't necessarily vote, and like you can make more than one donation. Like you could have one guy who gave $2,000 to one candidate, and another guy that gave $1, 500 times to another, and that guy's only going to get one. Each one of those is only going to get one vote. So no one was really talking about number of donors, and I was like, well, why is that? And then I went in and I saw, for some reason it seemed like John Smith seemed to be a very active donor. He was giving money in every state to every candidate. Many times, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, something's fishy here, right? There wasn't as many John Smiths, though, in each particular zip code with the same profession, right? So when I looked at, what John Smith did, and he lived in a different place, I started to narrow it down, and I created a sort of deduplication model, and certainly wasn't perfect.
Sorry, what's that called again? Deduplication model?
I was just deduplicating the data. So I created a key for the donations based on concatenating the name and the profession and the zip code. And I'm not sure if I had age as well back then, but yeah. So basically, the first infographic I made simply looked at the number of unique Trump donors there were and what percentage that was of the overall number of donors. And it was a pretty comical animation on it as well. So basically, the end result was a table with 50 rows, one for each state, with different columns referring to the number of unique donors, the average amount they gave, the total for that state. And I joined this to a JSON object containing like the geo coordinates of the United States, which is called like a GeoJSON, right? And using a JavaScript package called D3.js, which was embedded into the HTML for the website, I was able to visualize this information. So yeah, the internal web server for the blog was already up and running, so it was pretty easy to just create a new page with this custom scripts. But I was learning how to be a front end developer at the same time as I was learning to be a data scientist and a kind of a data journalist. So it was fun. I mean, it was running basically a one man show here with this stuff, and I was so lucky to have such wonderful support from these guys at RentHop. They really, as long as it was getting views and people were interested in it and it wasn't offensive too much, then they could let me do it. So, another thing I used was this. I don't know if I mentioned it, called QGIS, which is like a open source like geospatial modeling software, which started to come in handy as I sometimes needed it, like in other projects, I would need to actually draw out the boundaries for different cities or preview how this map would look before I put it onto a website. So some topography kind of software, right? So I was super surprised when with the help of our PR firm, that we got a bite from this company, this site MarketWatch, which is like, it's still pretty big. Like they're still one of the biggest like financial news websites. And like they get like over 100 million visitors a month. And so I, wasn't really sure if I was, I'd wanted to have my name on this one, but they wanted to use our graphic and our information, and I needed to make sure that this thing would look good on their site as well as it did on ours. So embedding things in in an iframe so that it would resize was, it's fairly. I think it's fairly simple nowadays, but yeah, for me it was a lot of trial and error. And so this early success led me to dive a bit deeper, and with the full support of the company, I did. I mapped out which neighborhoods leaned one way or the other, sharing that out to like local outlets, getting interviews, and generating lots and lots of traffic. And I even felt a bit of imposter syndrome because I really respected people like Nate Silver, who his model is far more advanced. And as I started to kind of look at it like countrywide, and I realized my information said something different, it was a tough thing to get past, right? I was like, this guy must like this must be wrong. Something must be wrong with my data. Uh, 'Cause, yeah, like closer to the 2016 elections, I wanted to know. Now it was just down to him or her, right? It was, and so it was a lot of things to actually try to find out. There was like, how did people that had once given to one of the other many candidates in the field, how did they behave later on? So I needed to see, okay, John Smith and zip code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, who gave money to who else was even running? Bernie Sanders. Yeah, it was like Bernie Sanders, right? Like, did he go on to give money to Hillary? And what I was finding was like Trump was getting more money, or was getting more of the previous donors to have come on to give him money than Hillary did. And he was even getting more people to go on to switch from giving money to her to him. I had noticed,
Oh,
which
wow.
was pretty impressive. Like, yeah, people actually. I had a couple outlets that wanted to talk about how that happened. So, like, what's the deal with this? And I'm like, can you send me the names of those people? Like, we want to contact them. It's like, oh, I don't know. How do I feel about that? I mean, it's public information. I don't want this to come back to me, but like, it's public info. So, okay,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, it's public data, but basically you put them together and then you found some pretty interesting insights.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, and this was like around September, October 2016, like not long before the election, and basically I had noticed this like a very narrow gap, the number of unique donors between these two. So I took this model. I also looked at like the electoral college and saw this. If my model was correct, that the states with the more unique donors were also going to play out as having more voters for those candidates, that a lot of people were maybe going to be surprised by the outcome of this election. And actually, I only had Delaware and Nevada wrong in my model, so I was quite
Okay.
surprised as well.
Okay. So the conclusion is states with more unique donors has a direct correlation with who will win in that state.
Yeah, how many people would vote? But
Ah,
that's
yeah.
whether it's still holds true today or not. I didn't reproduce it for 2020, but what I think the another like conclusion to draw there is that there's when you're starting a project with one purpose, you sometimes you stumble into something unexpected. So I didn't expect to find this insight. I'm just trying to create some useful content that users might want to read, and maybe a little buzzy, but still useful for a site where when you're not looking for an apartment, you want to still kind of like at some point you will again, like, oh, what was that site I used? Like, oh yeah, I remember that one that was publishing all those cool like studies. Yeah, that's the one. So it's like keeping people top of mind while offering some value that is kind of secondary to the primary value of your company. So we didn't spend a lot on like Facebook ads and stuff. Like, it was a lot of pretty good organic growth, like SEO, good SEO through backlinks. So it was it was pretty. I don't know if it was revolutionary, but definitely clever.
Well, but it's definitely something for the company at that moment, right? Something that begins just as like a fun small project while you are learning about data manipulation and front end development, right? And it turns out to be something super helpful for the company.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is something that young data analysts out there can reproduce on their own.
Mm.
These were all free things that I used, right? And it took me a few months, right? But it was stuff I had collectively learned through creating other reports and creating other visualizations, right? Like, this was before, long before I think about spending money on Tableau. Like, this was like, I wanted to embed these. I wanted this to be like RIP. So this was, these were, I'd say coded by hand, but everything's kind of not everything by hand, but it was,
It's
it was
manual. It's like lots of coding, basically, not like drag and drop in Tableau.
Exactly. Yeah. But it gave me all flexibility. And so if I want to go publish this on, another website, like news outlets were interested in this stuff. Like big name
Mm,
outlets were wanted like putting like a couple of things would go in like New York Post and like USA Today. They used our data. They didn't take my visualization, but they liked the data at least. So I felt pretty good about this, and I think so for anyone that's out there, like young data analysts or data scientists, they're trying to hone their skills or maybe trying to make a career change or impress a potential employer. Like you could find some great useful data out there and show them what you can do. I found it a lot more useful to be clever and willing to take risks and do something interesting than just having like a strong degree or in a particular language, right?
mm.
Or it doesn't. I think it's more about willing to try and
To get your hands dirty.
yeah, exactly. Get your hands dirty.
Cool. So regarding this project, basically you start this off as like some pet project where you are learning front end, learn data manipulation, and it's just for fun, right? But then you stumbled upon different public data, and then you try lots of stuff, but then you basically ended up finding the correlation between donors and election results, right?
Hmm.
So I think like there are lots of things to gain from this. Definitely, like you got your hand dirty, and then you learn the skill set. And well, I mean, like it might not be like the super complex AI machine learning model, but it definitely reflects some correlation that people might not see as insights before, right? Which for this project you use R, and yep, you did it in R Studio, and you use well D3.js for visualization and QGIS for modeling, right? So we got some name of the tools, and I think like one of the super important skills, other than just the finding the correlation of data, is also you are able to communicate them because you essentially put this into visualizations and it got lots of attention because it's super easy to understand and people could more easily understand the impact of what data can do from visualizing the instead of seeing rows and tables.
Indeed. Well said.
Cool stuff. I think like it's fun. Like these two cases are super fun to talk about, right? So, say Shane, would you give us some last words regarding why people or companies should actually embrace this data?
Sure. So, I mean, as someone working in this industry for about a decade, I think it's become second nature for me to look for data to back up my assumptions, right, and to press others for data to back up their claims. But I realize it's still not so common of a mindset, and so and often such a luxury is just not available, to wait for data before making a decision. So, good leaders they'll know where to find data when it seems like there might not be any, and great leaders have the foresight to get the data together before the problems arise to help steer clear of potential disasters.
That is awesome. Well, Shane, thank you so much for joining our mini data series. I hope to see you again soon, in person, offline, in the podcast, all of the above. And then, yeah, take care.
Thank you, man. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed these. Do hope I see you out there somewhere.
All right. That's a wrap. Thank you, people. Take care and do your data homework. See you around. If you enjoy our show, please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to Adaptive Series anywhere you get your podcast from, including YouTube if that is your thing. Find Adaptivity on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and our website, which is adaptivity.us. Also, we will be turning all the actionable items from the episode into a learning plan on our pub platform. If upskilling is your thing, the pub will do you justice, so give it a try. All links will be in the description of the podcast episode. Thank you for listening, and until next time.